I am Jimbo Paris, and you are listening to The Jimbo Paris Show. All right, how's it going? This is Jimbo Paris, and this is The Jimbo Paris Show. So today we have Mark Herschberg, great man. He's the big man. He's basically the chief of Averon, and it's basically he's a cryptographer, university instructor, even a ballroom dancer. So let's see what he has to say. I'm definitely interested. What's up, man?
Hey, Jimbo, thanks for having me on the show.
Mm-hmm. Wow, you got a lot going on in the background there.
Thanks. Yeah, I set this up once I started doing a virtual tour during COVID, and I went on lots of podcasts, many of whom have videos like you do. I realized I needed to get a background set up, and so I've got my book, but then also a bunch of things from just my life and things that I've done.
Quite familiar with a lot of those things, especially that knight chess piece in the upper right corner. We're going to talk a lot about that.
I was a competitive chess player as a kid, and so chess has always been a big part of my life.
So let's sort of expand on everything. Can you kind of give me a gist of who you are, what you're about, and what your message is?
Sure. I have this really interesting dual career path in my life. I started out as a software engineer when I graduated from MIT. I began during the dot-com era. I realized early on that I wanted to become a CTO, a chief technology officer, the person in charge of the engineers. And I realized that to get that job, it wasn't just about being a good engineer. I needed other skills, leadership, communication, networking, negotiating. No one ever taught this to me. So I had to develop those skills in myself. As I began to do so, I realized these skills aren't just for executives. They are for everyone. The most junior people at the companies, founders and entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, all of us benefit from these skills. And I began to train up people on my team. As I was doing so, MIT had surveyed companies, and they found these are the skills that companies wanted as well. And so what they did is created a program referred to as the Career Success Accelerator. When I heard they were putting this together, I reached out and said, I'm happy to help share some of my content. They asked me not only to share content, but to help develop additional content and then to stay and help teach. So in addition to being a CTO building tech startups and helping Fortune 500s innovate, I've also been teaching at MIT and elsewhere for the past 20 years and now have the book and speaking and other things that I do.
Interesting. Now, the first question I'd like to ask, what motivates you?
I am motivated by my own success, but also helping others. Helping people with their professional efficacy really drives me. And it pains me when I see people who can do so much more in their lives and their careers, but they just don't know how to take that next step.
Mm-hmm. How did you become self-motivated?
I really attribute that to my parents. From an early age, they always fostered learning, growing, developing as a person. And so it's just, I think, part of who I am as a person, thanks to them.
Mm-hmm. Why MIT?
I grew up a classic nerd. I love chess, physics, science, math, Star Trek, everything you'd expect. And MIT is really the mecca of STEM education. That is the place to be. And when I looked at colleges and I saw MIT, I realized this was the place to be. That's where I belonged. And it has always felt like home to me ever since I first set foot on campus.
Mm-hmm. Was it easy getting into MIT?
I don't think it was totally easy. The old saying is MIT was easy to get into, but hard to stay in, as opposed to certain other Ivies where it was hard to get in, but easier to stay in. Certainly, I needed good grades. I needed good SAT scores. I had to work hard. I had to have extracurriculars. But really staying in MIT, that was the hard part. There's a expression at MIT, trying to get an education at MIT is like trying to take a drink from a fire hose. You are just blasted with nonstop information, things you need to learn, problem sets you need to do, term papers, things you need to study for finals. It's a lot of work, but I did enjoy it.
Excellent. What were your challenges in MIT?
I had a couple. First was learning study skills because in high school, I never had to study. I could just read the book, hear the teacher give her talk, and that was it. I was done. That's all I had to do. I didn't really have to study. That did not work at MIT, where I did have to put in a little more effort. And so I really struggled at first, learning to develop study skills, learning that I couldn't do everything last minute. I had to prepare and plan. And the workload was not only bigger, but just harder. It was not, here's a simple formula. It's, here's differential equations you have to understand to do your physics homework. So it was really tough. At the same time, I was also developing as a person. I was not well socially developed going into MIT. And so I was also working on my social skills, sometimes to the detriment of my academic development.
Elaborate.
I grew up for various reasons. I just didn't develop as a person. It had to do partially with the childhood accent I had, partially with the bullying that I faced as a nerd in the 80s. And so when you think about kids and their development in terms of social skills with others that we get at age 7, 8, 12, 14, I wasn't getting those interactions. I wasn't playing with others. I wasn't really involved in social activities with others. So it, I think, limited my growth in that sense. And I struggled. I had to learn to develop. So I was a little behind the curve, even though academically I was grade levels ahead. Socially, I was definitely probably further behind my peers. That's something that I began to catch up on while at MIT and even throughout my 20s.
Do you think it was your intelligence and maturity?
That was part of it. So there were certain things where I think I could just see things and jump a few steps ahead of other people. And they didn't see what I saw, and they would behave in a childlike manner, which was age appropriate. But I'd say, no, that's not right. We should be doing this. This is the more logical thing to do. And then they'd think I was weird. There were other things. I remember my parents bought me an Atari. Now, for those who don't know, an Atari, this was the original Nintendo, the original Sega. Before any of those, there was the Atari system, and that was the hot game. And my parents got it partially, so they knew that was a hot toy that would help make me more popular. But I saw through the other kids. I remember when they would want to come over and play, but really they were more interested in just playing with the Atari. That's the only reason they wanted to hang out with me. And I could see that. And I didn't want to be used that way. Most 7-year-olds would probably just think, oh, okay, yeah, I'll come over, play, great. But I understood what was happening. I didn't want that. And so I would turn down those opportunities. And that probably came from my maturity.
Mhm. When did it start working for you?
I'd say in my 20s, probably the latter part of my 20s, I started to figure things out on the social side. Professionally, I was doing very well. I was managing people by age 27. I was running a team of 25 people. But I think things started to click late 20s and then continued to accelerate as I got into my 30s.
How was managing a team?
I enjoy it. And one of the reasons I mentioned early on I wanted to become a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer, it's because I realized there are some unique challenges that you get when managing that you don't get elsewhere. As an engineer, I solve a lot of hard, complex problems, but we have rules for how to do it. If you ask me how to build a bridge, it's not my area, but we'll just take it as an example. How do you build a bridge? We say, okay, well, let's understand how big does a bridge have to be? How many cars per hour go over it? What's the budget? Any other constraints? And then we just pull from a library of solutions. Do you want a truss bridge, a suspension bridge? We say, okay, well, this is how it works. And we can do the calculations to figure out how that bridge can work. And most engineering problems, we're pulling from a library of solutions. Now, even when we do new things like building rocket ships, we don't have a lot of solutions. We're pushing the envelope, but still we've got a lot of support. We have a lot of rules and things we can apply. When it comes to managing people, every rule pretty much has an exception. There's no universal, this is the formula to apply, and it always works. And so you have to understand the subtleties of the situation, and it adds a different type of complexity that I found really interesting. So I got excited for that type of challenge in addition to the business and strategy challenge and the engineering challenges that I love.
When did the other hobbies come in?
Well, different hobbies at different times. Chess, I started playing since the age of 5, and I was going to tournaments probably, I think, before I was 10. I was doing chess tournaments, I was going to chess camp. Then, other hobbies, the other big one for me was the competitive ballroom dancing. That I started at MIT. What most people don't know is MIT has a very strong competitive ballroom dance team. In fact, MIT has an incredibly large sports program in general, and we have some top national teams, just not in the standard sports. We have a D3 football team, or soccer team, or other kind of standard sports. We're not known for that. But for crew, pistol, for I think fencing, we were pretty good, and ballroom dancing. We've produced some national championships. We had a wonderful ballroom dance team. So I got into it in my 20s. And the great thing about ballroom dancing, it's not an NCAA sport. So there were not restrictions. It wasn't you only get 5 seasons to play. So even as faculty, staff, alumni, we could all be part of the team. I stayed on and kept competing with the MIT team throughout my 20s.
What did you learn from that experience?
Ballroom dancing, I think it did help with my socialization skills somewhat. It was certainly a fun, amazing activity, but I think what it helped me most with was building up some confidence, and particularly for public speaking. I always recommend when I teach public speaking, people should do some type of activity. Could be ballroom dancing, it could be theater, improv, martial arts, other types of sports, but something where people are watching you. Because the hardest thing that happens when we're on stage public speaking, we get nervous. We stand there and think, oh, all right, pants zipped up, and are people looking at me, and did I comb my hair? And you have this nervousness, and it holds you back. And more than anything else, we just need confidence to say, I'm up here, and maybe I forgot to zip my pants. Maybe my hair is not perfectly combed. In fact, for this presentation, I've got 7 lights. I realized I only turned on 6 of them. One of my lights is off. But you know what? I don't care. It doesn't matter. I can keep going. And when you're performing, so in ballroom dancing, you're out on the competition floor, you are quite literally being judged. You have judges there marking you. And if you don't do well, you don't get called back. And you're going to screw up. Sometimes you'll screw up and no one notices. Sometimes you screw up and they notice and you don't get called back. And that's okay. Life goes on. There will be another round, another competition. No one laughs at you when you screw up. In fact, one of the things I love about ballroom, rarely, but sometimes people will trip and fall. And when that happens, as a couple gets back up, the entire audience will cheer for them. They will applaud for them, saying, we are with you. We support you. We've all fallen down in our life, and we're behind you. Don't feel ashamed. Keep going. And when you get that confidence, when you've been out on the floor, when you screwed up and say, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. That must be so embarrassing. But you keep going. That's the confidence I carry with me when I do talks, whether it's on video or live talks. Yeah, I'll screw up. I don't care. I've screwed up worse and I've gotten through it.
That's the interesting thing. You know, you raise an extremely interesting point because I never thought of it like that, but most people think I hate public speaking when in reality what it is I hate being the center of attention. I hate being focused on by tons of people.
It's because they're afraid of making mistakes. People don't mind being the center of attention at a party. If everyone's paying attention to you and they're laughing at your jokes, you love it, most people. But it's, ooh, I'm on stage and I'm being judged and I'm afraid of being embarrassed.
How did you carry that over to your chess?
Chess, well, I did chess earlier, and chess is probably a little less embarrassing. Now, there's a term in chess called a blunder, and that's when you make a really stupid move and suddenly you just realize your opponent can take a piece, there's nothing you can do about it, or you just put yourself in a bad position. We've all blundered. And I think it's just part of the game that you kind of go, oh, I can't believe I did that, but you move on. It's not so much a reflection of you because it's the pieces. Whereas when you're on stage, whether you're performing in ballroom dancing or standing doing a presentation, it's you, it's your body, it's your words that are being judged. So I think it's a little more personal in that circumstance.
Talked a lot about what you were sort of doing there, but can you sort of get into, your master's thesis, securing electronic voting over the World Wide Web?
Sure. My graduate work at MIT was in cryptography. And for my master's thesis, it was secure electronic voting over the World Wide Web, finding a way people could vote from their laptops. For this, we use cryptographic protocols, ways to ensure that it's really you who is voting, that you don't vote more than once, that no one secretly threw out your vote. And so we can use these mathematical algorithms to prove this happens. That being said, we should never vote online. I emphasize that. I'm going to say it again. Never vote online. That is the fastest way to destroy our democracy. Because even though we can say, well, the math works out, the math works, we can prove it mathematically, still, we know when we write software, there are bugs in the software. We make mistakes all the time. So even if the math works, the software could be buggy. Even if the software isn't buggy, the operating system could be buggy. We all know we have to patch our operating systems because there are vulnerabilities. Even if the operating system is secure, the hardware could have vulnerabilities. There was a hack a couple years ago. China got control or had access to a key supplier for Apple computers. And every Apple computer bought around that time had a little extra piece of hardware that Apple never intended to be there that was a backdoor for likely China, we're pretty sure it was them, to access the computers. So you have to have the algorithms have to be right, the software has to be right, the operating system has to be right, and the hardware has to be right. And you have to have the whole supply chain. You have to make sure that computer that was designed is absolutely correct right off the manufacturing line has never been tampered with anywhere along the line. The reality is we can't do that. And while we're willing to accept bugs in, let's say, a video game, if you're playing Angry Birds and there's a little glitch, you go, okay. Your accounting software, if occasionally it crashes, you're not happy, but okay, you reboot. We cannot accept any flaws in our voting system because what happens is if there's one little flaw, someone can exploit that flaw millions of times and alter the vote. So we should never, ever, ever vote electronically. Now, one catch, and I'll explain what I mean by that. We can do electronic counting. In my state, I live in New York City, in New York State. We use those basically Scantron forms. I fill out the little bubbles, I stick in the machine, and it will count the votes electronically. That is okay. All it's doing is counting. There are paper ballots. And if anyone ever says, I wonder if it counted correctly, well, then you open up the machine and you pull out the paper votes and you have people from both parties watching. They sit there and they count and they check that the tally is correct. These machines are also not hooked up to the internet. So you can do electronic counting as long as you're just counting paper or other physical ballots. That's okay. but we should never vote over the internet.
So physical voting is superior.
100%. And it's again, think of it this way. If I was a bad actor, if I really wanted to disrupt the vote, physically, what could I do? I could go to a voting center and maybe I take a baseball bat, I start smashing machines. Okay, I can destroy a couple hundred votes. Or maybe I somehow sneak in the night before and no one sees me and I can modify the votes in some way. I can physically change it. I'm not saying it's impossible. It could happen, but I have to go to a center and do that. And I might be able to change hundreds of votes. Now, hundreds of votes can swing an election. We have seen that, but usually hundreds of votes won't. If I want to do it to more than one polling place, I have to go to multiple polling places. That takes time, or I have to have multiple people doing it. On the other hand, if we're doing it electronically and it's connected to the internet, from my laptop, I can write a script that will connect to millions of different polling places, to millions of ballots, and I can modify all of them sitting from my laptop. I can do millions of pieces of damage at once instead of physically where I had to go there and do it. And I just can't scale that. So electronically, we can scale things, including our attacks.
That's really interesting. Well, you learn something new every day. Thank you for that. And let's kind of go back a little bit to that discussion we had before about sort of, I think there's a lot of people here trying to build their own social skills too. And one book in particular, does this one sound interesting to you? The Charisma Myth.
It is Olivia Fox-Caban, who's the author of the book, is a personal friend of mine. I've known her for years, and that is a fantastic book. I actually reference it in mine and recommend it. The Charisma Myth basically teaches charisma is something you can learn. And in fact, all the skills that we talk about, we know we could learn to play golf. We know we can learn to do chemistry. Now, some people are naturally better at science or at a sport, but it doesn't mean the rest of us can't learn to do it. I was terrible at all sports, including dancing, but I trained and became a national champion. All of us can get better if we train. And the same is true for charisma, as well as skills in my book, like leadership, networking, and negotiating. And so she breaks down, here are the components of charisma. Here's how to do it. Here's how to change how you think about it. In fact, that book helped me improve just my charisma. So it's a wonderful book. I highly recommend to people.
Great. And are you an advocate of talent or hard work? Because coming from a guy that came from MIT and somebody that started chess at the age of 10, forgive me if this sounds a bit strange, but you sound like a talented individual.
But that's not for a lack of hard work. In fact, to go back to that analogy, when you think about someone who is naturally good at something, so Tiger Woods, for example, there's a story he hit his first hole in one at age 3. I probably couldn't even swing a putter at age 3. He was naturally good at, but he also worked hours and hours and hours to get better. One does not preclude the other. In fact, people just say, "Oh, well, yeah, I'm a naturally good leader, or I'm a naturally good public speaker. I can just get on stage and I can talk." They think, "Okay, I don't have to work," and they stay at that plateau. Those of us who say, "I have to work and work and work," surpass that plateau. We get better because we put the work into it. The natural talent is just your starting point, but it is the work that gets you further in life.
You're saying essentially there is natural talent, but there are no natural masters.
Yes, that is, I like that line. The mastery comes from the work. Some of us might just be a little closer based on our natural talent, but all of us need to work hard to get there.
How do you work hard?
For me, it's putting in the effort. I don't have any formula. I don't have, oh, from 6 to 10 every morning, this is what I do. I'm the type of person, I work when I want to work and I don't when I don't. So when I was writing the book, for example, I hear all these stories of disciplined writers. I would just say, oh, I think I want to write. And I'd sit down, I'd start typing things out. And when I run out of steam, I say, okay, I'm going to stop. Sometimes I wouldn't write for 2 or 3 days straight. Sometimes at 2 in the morning, I couldn't sleep. And I'd have to get up and get to my laptop because there was something in my head to put out. So I just do the work when it fits in naturally for me. Now, one of the things I do though is I learn everything I can. Even though I am a CTO, or really a CTPO, a Chief Technology Product Officer. Like, okay, he's a very technical guy. He has to pay attention to product management and different technologies, and I do. But I've also read books on accounting. In fact, I recently read a book on financial auditing and forensic accounting. I've read books on marketing. I've taken classes on marketing. I've learned about sales. I've learned about mining. I've learned about all these different industries that have nothing to do with anything I'm doing, because I just like learning new things and bringing these ideas in because I think it makes me more effective.
Speaking of accounting, didn't you teach financing at Harvard Business School?
I didn't teach at Harvard. I teach at MIT, but I did spend a year working with two finance professors to create a program now used to teach finance there. So we create a special type of simulation. Harvard Business School typically teaches through the case study. So it's class discussions. For finance, that's not always the best way to do it. Finance is pretty straightforward. Buy low, sell high. If you know that, you can do well in finance. So they wanted to create more of a market simulator. Now, there were other simulators out there, but they had some patentable techniques that these professors had come up with. And then I worked with them to implement this and come up with different ways to teach. The great thing about that, most people have to pay Harvard to learn finance. I actually got Harvard to pay me to learn finance. I didn't know any finance or economics before going there. And I said to them up front, I said, look, I don't know your field. They said, oh, don't worry, we can teach you that. And for me, that was part of the reason I took the job. It wasn't that they were paying me more than anyone else. I could have found higher paying jobs. But I sat 3 feet from a professor for a year in his office. And the first 2 weeks, it was mentoring. They gave me books to read. I'd read the book. Then we do some tutoring each afternoon. And so I had my crash course in 2 weeks. And then throughout the year, as I had other questions, I would learn, or when the students would come in or he'd prepare for his classes, I'd hear him do this as a fly on the wall. And I learned so much that year. That was a fantastic job. I was also lucky. I used to have lunch every day with the junior finance faculty, some of the marketing and negotiation faculty. So I picked up a lot hanging out with faculty members at Harvard Business School.
Excellent, excellent. And another question I need to ask is, why do you value finance?
Just something I wanted to learn. It's something we should all know. Everyone needs to know personal finance. You should understand investments, your 401k, retirement planning, stocks versus bonds, bank account, credit card debt. Everyone needs to know that. It's unfortunate that we don't teach that in school. But then, of course, as an entrepreneur, I need to understand business financing. That means just basic accounting, understanding things like cash flow, understanding P&L. It also means understanding when I get an investment, when we go to angels and venture capitalists, I need to understand all those terms about when they give me money, what does this mean? Because I have seen many first-time entrepreneurs who don't understand this, and they take in some money only to discover years down the road that even though they're doing well, it's not as well as they thought, because those investors have all sorts of terms that give them the lion's share of the upside. So it's really important to understand, if you're running a business, not just personal finance, but business financing as well.
What was it like starting your first business?
So there wasn't any point where I said, oh, this is my business I'm starting and this is mine early on. I typically got involved with other folks very early. One of the first companies I was at, it was 5 kids out of MIT. I say kids, they had taken time off from MIT. I was a couple years out. And they had this idea and they were working out of someone's living room. And I thought they had a good idea. So I joined in and it was okay, let's get this going. So I wasn't perhaps there from day one, but I was certainly there pre-financing when we went from a couple kids playing around to a grown-up company. And being an entrepreneur, it means you're doing everything. In fact, I was the mature guy in the room. I was the guy going out buying toilet paper. When we moved into our first office, no one thought about getting a cleaning person. Then very quickly said, "All right, we need cleaners," but the cleaners came once a week. No one thought about office supplies, so I would go out and buy rolls of toilet paper and put into the bathroom. In fact, even 20 years later, I remember I was the person who. This sounds like a minor thing, but this is important. I was in an office. We had in the bathroom these tiny soap dispensers, the kind of things that you would have at home. But in an office of 70 people, you go through that soap dispenser very quickly. And because they only cleaned or replenished the bathrooms once a week, we regularly ran out of soap. They'd refill it, but it was a tiny dispenser. No one in the office thought, go out and buy a bigger soap dispenser. I did about a week after showing up. But it's those little things. And when you're an entrepreneur, you have to pay attention to all those little things. And they make a big difference because if all your employees are constantly complaining we're out of soap, they're not going to be happy. That is such an easy fix. That means going out, spending $2 on a bigger soap container, and you solve the problem. But you have to pay attention because not every the marketing person says, well, I'm not in charge of soap. And the salesperson says, I'm not in charge of soap. In fact, no one's officially in charge of soap except for you as the founder.
Now, can we relate that soap back to your new kind of because you actually raised a really good point there. It kind of when you mention that soap dispenser thing, it kind of just shows how high level your people skills are now. Like most people with people skills wouldn't even think of that, you know?
It's paying attention to the small things. And, one thing I've learned in life, we all see the big things. We all see I'm losing a big customer, a big opportunity, a big risk, a big problem. We all see that. But it's the little things that lead to big things down the road. It's having people unhappy about the soap or lack of toilet paper. No one's necessarily going to quit over, oh, we were out of soap last week. But if week after week we're out of soap and they're having a bad day, they just got in a fight with a coworker, a small thing, this is another little thing that piles on. Gosh, and we're always out of soap around here. God, this is a kind of crappy company. As opposed to everything is great. Well, you got in a fight with a coworker, but it happens sometimes. And so these little things add up. These little things often lead to opportunity. I was having a discussion a couple years ago with my CEO. We were talking late one night, and he had this idea. He had an idea for using hashing, which is a certain mathematical property, using hashing with addresses, as in email addresses and phone numbers. And this one little conversation, we started to explore it. Next thing you know, we came up with a patent. So about 2 days later, we had filed a provisional patent. And a couple months later, we put out a brand new type of messaging application, all from this one conversation. We weren't planning ahead. He just said, oh, I have this idea. And we started building upon it. So looking at these small things, you can discover risks and opportunities and things that get bigger down the road. So I've learned to always pay attention to these small things.
So you're a small details guy.
You need to be a small details guy as well as a big strategy person. Well, I'll back that up. You need a team to have people who worry not only about the big strategy and big issues, but those small details. Some people are better at one over the other. And if that's the case, make sure you have as a partner someone who can handle that other piece of it. It's like, I'm not a great salesperson. I can go in, I can sell when I'm in the meeting, but I can't do the rainmaking. I can't go cold call. That's not my strength. And so I need people on my team who can do that for me. Now, I'm very good at other things, the people skills, the technology, the strategy. And I know salespeople say, look, you just give me something to sell and point me at who to sell it to, and I can just tear it up. Great. We are good partners for each other. But the more of these skills you have yourself, the less you're going to rely on other people, or the less you can, this is maybe too strong a statement, have the wool pulled over your eyes. When you think about that classic case of, oh, my car doesn't work, and you go to the mechanic, and you don't know, is this a $40 job or a $400 job? And you kind of have to trust, well, the mechanic knows, and I don't have any way to say he's wrong. And you just hope you're not being taken. When it comes to business, I have seen time and again, particularly with technology, people hire these offshore development teams that are garbage, but they don't know any better. Or a product person who's mediocre and misses some opportunities. Or a salesperson, and you don't know, well, is the problem that she's not a good salesperson, or is the problem is you don't have the right product yet? It's not the right MVP. You're going for the wrong market. If you don't understand sales or your industry or product, you don't know which one of those is the problem. If you can understand those, maybe you're not the best expert, but you understand it, you can say, yeah, I can see she's a great salesperson. What's tripping us up is they're saying this doesn't meet their needs. Okay, we have a product problem. Or it's the right features, but boy, this is buggy. And as soon as they do the trial, it keeps crashing. Okay, I've got a technology problem. So having at least some level of knowledge in the different disciplines helps you be more effective in managing in that domain.
Would you consider yourself, well, let's phrase it this way. Do you think it's better to be a generalist or a specialist?
That is a question I get asked often, and it's not even simply the right question. Let's do a simple math problem. And this is how I start chapter 1 of my book. This is something I learned from my friend, Professor Charles Leiserson at MIT. So imagine you have a rectangle that's 4 by 10. And as you look at this rectangle, you want to maximize the area by increasing one of the sides by 2 units. So the question is, do you increase the short side, the 4, or increase the long side, 10? Now, if you're watching the replay, feel free to pause and take a moment to think about it. The answer is you want to increase the short side. You want to go from 4 to 6. That's going to give you 60 units. Okay, so middle school math, what does this have to do with the question you asked? Well, it comes down to the fact that we all have short sides and long sides. So for different people, your long side's probably your discipline. For me, it's technology. I know some finance, but I'm not the world's greatest finance expert. But an accountant or someone on Wall Street, much better at finance, not as good at tech as I am. But you have to keep working on that long side. If I don't keep up with technology, I become a dinosaur. I'm using out-of-date technologies. If you don't keep up with the new accounting regulations, you're not going to be a good accountant. All of us have changes in our industry. All of us have to keep working on that long side. But now here's the other challenge. Imagine someone in whatever discipline who is extremely brilliant. Let's say she knows everything about this field. She is an expert, but boy, is she a terrible communicator. She gets lost going down rabbit holes. She loses her train of thought. When she's standing on a stage, just stutters, and she can't really, what was the thought, and just hard to listen to. So even though she has brilliant ideas, even though she's really long in that area, her short side, her communication side is so short, no one wants to listen to her. No one can understand what she's talking about. So her overall area is really tiny. In her case, getting a little bit better at her communication. Not saying you're ready to stand on that TED Talk stage, but just you present better. Your emails are clearer. You're a little more coherent. You present better. People are going to listen to you more. That short side got a little bit longer. And so what happens when we go from that 4 to 6 and we get 60, what we've done is we've taken those 2 extra units and we've amplified them by that 10. All of us have short and long sides. Now we have to keep working on our long side because that's what makes us valuable in the role, but we have to pay attention to the short sides as well to make that knowledge, that skill, more applicable, more effective. Now, the secret is we have more than 2 sides. So I think you have to work on both of them. And it's just what's the right ratio for you.
Well, that's a really, really good take on a lot of those things. You seem like you figured yourself out entirely. But my question is, how did you now manage to build other people as well?
That's been the luck I've had being involved in this MIT program, that we've been teaching these skills. Now, the skills I cover in my book, the skills that we have in the class, are
What's
ones
the
that
name of your book?
the book is the Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. Because these are the skills: leadership, networking, negotiating, communication. We've heard of them all. But if you think about it, we all know networking. Okay, yeah, I hear networking is really important. I've heard that since I was young. Well, if it's so important, how come no one sat you down and actually taught you how to do it? They tell us it's important, but they wouldn't tell us what to do. And that's crazy. So when we created this class, and these skills come from surveys that we've done at MIT and other universities of the skills that companies want, not just for recent college graduates, not just for engineers, but everyone. These are the top skills companies want in the 21st century, and yet we're not teaching them. So at MIT, we said, well, here are the skills. Let's break down what they are and how to start teaching them. And we've had the fortune of 20 years of refining the content, of trial and error, of working through this. In fact, one of the comments I often get on the book is people say, I was reading your book and I was reading this page and I had some questions, but as soon as I turned the page, you answered my question. Like, well, that's not magic. That's the fact that I've taught it for over 2 decades. And I know when I say this, these are the next questions that always come up. So of course I addressed it in the book. So it really comes from, I think, having practiced and done this for decades, that we've really refined it in the MIT class and in my book.
Now, just for a quick summary, what do you think are some of the biggest problems that you address in the book? And you don't have to go too deep into it because I want people to read it, but just kind of.
Well, I'll give the 10 skills. There are 3 sections, 10 chapters. Section 1, careers. Chapter 1, how to create and execute a career plan. Most of us don't even have plans, let alone how to execute on them. Chapter 2, working effectively. Things like managing your manager, understanding corporate culture. Chapter 3 is interviewing. Now, there's lots of content how to be a candidate, very little on how to actually hire other people. And so many of us have to hire our coworkers, but we don't teach people how to do that. The second section, leadership and management, a chapter on leadership, and then management. I look at the people side of management and the process side of management. And the third section, interpersonal dynamics, covers communication, networking, negotiation, and ethics. In each chapter, there is a mental shift, a way to change how you think about this particular skill, and then specific actionable items you can do to better implement and execute on that. And it's designed, I call it the Career Toolkit, because you can just pick up any tool, any chapter. You can say, you know what, I've got the book. I'd recommend start with chapter 1. It's only 7 pages long. That's the intro, or the intro, not chapter 1. But then you jump right to chapter 7. Then you go to chapter 2, then to chapter 6. Read them in any order you want. Work on the skill you want when you want, because the chapters stand alone. They do reinforce each other a bit, but you can read each other alone. So whatever skill you need to work on, this is going to get you started.
Did you intend to write the book that way?
I didn't intend to write a book initially, but once it became a book, I very much want it that way. One of my criticisms of books, particularly business books, you read it and you get the idea within about 30 or 40 pages, and then they spend another 150 pages just rehashing the same idea. There's a reason for that. It has to do with the way books are done. Books need to be a certain spine width, because if you think back to the days when we used to go into bookstores, the books would be on the shelf with their spine out. And so if it was too thin, if it was less than about 120 pages, the spine was too thin, you couldn't even see the title. And if it was too thick, if it was more than about 300 some pages, it was taking up too much space on the shelf. Obviously, there are exceptions for books. A Stephen King book, I think the final Harry Potter book was like 700 pages, but she's J.K. Rowling. She can get away with whatever she wants. But most books had to meet that certain spine width. And if you didn't have enough content, you just rehashed or threw in garbage and fluff just to make it that big. So I've always hated that about books. And with my book, I get right to the point. I didn't want to spend 200 pages talking about one thing and rehashing it. I said, here's what you need to know. Here's the start. Now we can move on to another skill. So I try to make it very dense in terms of topics, but in a very light, accessible, and readable way.
Excellent. And let's kind of look more in depth in that. We're just going to bring up your website real quickly here and kind of take a quick look at it.
There's a lot of tools and resources on the website.
Interesting. What types of tools?
So in addition to the book, if you go to my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com, there's a blog where I have more information and talk about more of these topics. There is a free app. I create a free companion app for the book available from the Android and iPhone stores and linked from the website. Because one of the challenges when you read a business book or a self-help book, you read the book, you say, wow, there's a lot of great information, but then you forget 2 weeks later. And so with the app, what you can do is you can download it, and then you can use it one of two ways. Each day, it's going to pop up one of the pieces of advice from the book, one of the tips. It just pops up as a notification on your phone at a time you set. You look at, then you just swipe it away. That's going to help you retain it. It's going to keep it top of mind, but just pop up, look, swipe. Takes 2 seconds a day. You don't even need to open the app. Or you can say, I'm about to go into a negotiation. What were all those tips? Okay, I'm going to now open the negotiation set, and I'm going to flip through those tips as a refresher. So the app, which you can see on the website right there up top, you can see the app page. If you go there, I link to the Android and iPhone stores, and you can download that free app. There's also the resources page. And on the resources page, I list other books I recommend if you want to go deeper on a topic, including Olivia's great book, The Charisma Myth. Then I link to free resources online if you want to go deeper in some of these topics using online tools. And I have a number of free downloads, including career planning questions, including a professional development guide companies can use to upskill their entire organization. All of this is free on my website. I give it away because I want to help other people and organizations improve. So all of this is at thecareertoolkitbook.com.
You offer a lot of resources.
Yeah, I think the book is just the start.
And so kind of run through. So this is what's the synopsis?
It's these 10 chapters. So if you hit the synopsis page, you'll see I just run through. Here are the 10 chapters in the book. Here's what you get out of each chapter. At the end of each chapter, what we'll have done, we'll have taken that short side, we'll have taken that 4 and moved it to a 6. Not a 10, because there's a lot to cover, but we'll get you started down that path. We'll get you that mental shift to help you see opportunities in that space, in that skill set, in a new way. And from there, you can start using the tips in the book. And then if you want to continue to develop that skill, you can use some of the other resources, the books and links online. I, at the end of each chapter, have a next step, so how to go further, or you can move on to one of the other skills in the book.
And you have, what's the next important page? Because you seem to have a lot of tabs here. So author, awards, media, speaking.
Well, let's go to the app page for a second.
Okay.
And we can look on the app page. We can see what the app looks like. There we go, on the app page. So if you can see that's what it looks like. You're going to have, if you scroll down a little more, And those are the two links to the Apple Store and Google Play Store. So I'll take you right to the store to download. So you can do this on your phone. Go to the Career Toolkit book on your phone, go to that app page, and then click one of those two links, and it'll be ready to download. But if we scroll down on that page a bit, you'll see some screenshots. So you see we have different categories, so certain types of tips, and there on the right is an example of a tip. That's the type of thing that'll just pop up on your phone. So this one, never just drop your mentor. When it's time to move on, thank your mentor and let them know why you're moving on. That's going to help you better maintain a relationship if you want to go back. But that's it. It takes you 2 seconds to read that when it pops up on your phone. Swipe it away and say, all right, that was a good tip. Glad I got reminded of that. Done for the day. So it's really easy to help retain it. Now, if you go to the resources page, so that's got a lot of other great tools on there. So let's look at the resources page. It starts with guides. Now, guides are a number of free downloads. That first one, the Career Toolkit Development Program. This is something you can download for how you can upskill your entire organization. If you are a company owner, a founder, use this completely free to how to upskill your organization, create better engagement. That's going to help you retain employees. You can also give this to HR at your company and say, I heard about this great program. Can we start? It's free to download. It is free to use. There is no cost involved. There are some other downloads, career plan questions to help you think through your career, candidate interview questions. So what to ask when you are interviewing, the Career Toolkit hiring sheet. If you're a hiring manager, things to think about in the hiring process. Now, as we go further down, chapter 2 of the book, one of the things I cover in Working Effectively, personality assessments, Myers-Briggs, HBDI, BASIS. These are links to free versions of them on the web. So if you want to do these and learn more about yourself, here are some links. Now, I haven't personally tested any of these, but they looked reliable. So those are there for you. We have case studies. So if you want to download case studies as you do that development program we talked about before, here are some case studies that you can use for your discussions. I only link to free resources. There are obviously paid versions out there as well. And then if you scroll down further to the references and recommendations, so references on there, a little further down, these are all the different books that I reference in mine. So I make a reference to it, and you might say, oh, that sounded really interesting. I want to go further. They're all links so you can find those books. And then recommendations are additional books. I may not have referenced it in my own, but still, you can see that we just passed the Charisma Myth, Olivia's book we mentioned earlier. But here under recommended books, I didn't necessarily reference it, but I have read these books. I do like them, and you might just want to go further on a topic by reading them. So this is all there. Everything there is free. Obviously, you have to buy some of those books. That's between you and those authors. But all the other resources are completely free, and they're there to help you go further.
Excellent. And
I keep adding to this list. I keep adding new content to it every couple of weeks.
And new content is added to the app as well.
For the app, we are actually doing a general version of the app. And so, in fact, if you go to a different website, if you go to Cognosco Media, COGNOSCO media.com. So that's COGNOSCO media.com. That is a publishing website. Now, on that site, let's say COGNOSCO. It's Latin for I learn. At cognoscomedia.com, what we have are a number of resources. So it's COG. That's we have
CO. You're saying CO. Yeah.
COGNOSCO media MEDIA.com. At cognoscomedia.com, there are two interesting things there. The first is for anyone who might want to do their own book. If you go to resources, on the resources link, when I did my book, I read about 200 different articles. I read about 1,500 articles on every aspect of publishing, and I linked to the 200 or so most useful. So anyone thinking of doing a book, start here, and you can see how to find an agent, how to come up with a good title, how to market your book, how to think about tax implications. I've got all linked from there to help other authors. But then we have a new app coming out. And if you go to the Brain Bump app, you can see that up top. The app I created for my book, we realized this will work for other books, other podcasts, other blogs, other content. And so the Brain Bump app, which is coming out in April as a beta, is going to be like my app, but with content from all sorts of different authors and podcasters. And so that will continue to have new content being added to that app each and every week. And so it'll work similar to my app in that you'll get those little tips and you can see it and you can just have them pop up and swipe it away when you're done, or you can open it up and flip through them. But it won't just be content from me, it'll be content from lots of different people. So that's something to look for in April. It'll be in beta, so there might be a couple bugs early on. Bear with us, but that's going to be a really fantastic app for just picking up lots of different knowledge.
Oh, you definitely bring a lot to the table.
I keep pretty busy.
Great. And I think you had a few other pages there. You had if we go back to your website, you had suggestions with media too, right? Or what was that?
So if you go back to the careertoolkitbook.com, so some of the other pages, there's the awards page, which just lists all the different awards that the book has won. I think we've won probably about 7 awards at this point. Lots of different ones from different competitions. I've been very fortunate. I've done well there. On the media page, that links to all the media I've done. So I've been, at this point, I've recorded over 300 podcasts. About 230 of them are currently live, as well as traditional media. I've been on news programs, I've various articles, reviews of the book. So on the media page, if you like what you're hearing and you've read the book, but you want to get more, if you go to the media page, you can see lots of different media outlets I've been on. And so as you scroll down the page, so you can see there's some media coverage, things I've been in, but as you scroll down further, you'll just see rows and rows and rows of different podcasts I've been on. And that just, I update that on a near daily basis as new podcasts come out. I get interviewed quite a lot, so I just continually add to that. So I talk about lots of different topics and you can see it all there. And then the speaking page, that's just for those who are interested in having me come speak at their company or their organization. One of some of the things I talk about, so you can see the topics if your organization wants to hire me to speak.
Oh, so they book you and then you just show up to their events?
I wish it was that simple. You just book me and I show up. Usually there's some back and forth. You work with the event organizers to plan, especially if it's a conference. You plan timing. You need to tie it into what else is going on. But yes, there's been a lot of virtual the last 2 years, as you can imagine. So those are usually easier. But I will also either be at the company, and a lot of companies, especially as they come back to office, people are booking me to say, all right, we want to get back to office. We want to do that reset. We want to get people thinking about how to communicate, how to work better as a team, how to think of their careers going forward at this organization. So I'm seeing a lot of things with the return to office. And then, of course, conferences are back to in-person. So I keynote, I do workshops. So I do both in-person and virtual talks.
Excellent. And speaking of these talks and everything else, what are some of your best, what about the blog? Let's look at the blog and then I could ask you a final question here.
The blog I put out each and every week. Every Tuesday, I come out with a new topic. And so you can see the most recent one, Permission to Network. And that's how to think about networking at an event. I write a lot about the topics in the book. So how long will the Great Resignation last? Commitment to your career path. If you go further down, you'll see other topics on leadership, networking, negotiation, career planning, and they're all organized by category. So if you say, I just want to see negotiation podcast or negotiation blog topics, well, you can click that little icon and it'll just show the negotiation ones. or just a leadership one. So it can help you find content that's relevant to your needs. And each and every week, I put out new content. So always check back there because there's always going to be lots of great new resources coming up.
Excellent. And we're getting a bit short on time here. So let's, I think we need to go back. So one last final thing. So what are some of your best client success stories?
I'm trying to think of ones I can share because a lot of the HR ones, they don't want to talk about. Well, we were in this bad situation, but really it's helping companies. Communication is a piece that underlies a lot of it, especially as we come out of the Great Recession. We're seeing a lot more people who are siloed. Those water cooler conversations don't happen anymore. And so people are really just working with that narrow set of the coworkers they kind of work with every day and helping people develop those internal networks, helping people communicate better with people from different parts of the organization really uplifts everyone. So that and the professional development program, those are the two that I think really have helped the most organizations.
Excellent. And this has been a great interview. If there's any final things you would like to tell the audience, what would you say to them?
When you work on these skills, they are things that it's best not to simply read them, but to try them. Like learning a sport, you can't just say, well, here are the rules of the sport, you're done. You have to try it. You have to drill, you have to scrimmage, you have to practice. And it's best done with other people. So I recommend creating groups of people. Think of it like a book club or a reading group. And I describe how to do it in that the Career Toolkit development program, that first download on the resources page. If your company doesn't want to do it yourself. Create a local meetup group, find other people in your organization or just friends or others you have, create that group and together work on these skills. And that's going to move you along much faster.
Excellent. And to just finish this off, I would like to get a special thanks to our sponsors. Buy Allison Roberts' book, Behind the Power. It's a powerful tool concerned on actually transforming people's life patterns and giving them a positive change mentally and spiritually. And then the next sponsor we have is Judy Ryan, our LifeWork Systems affiliate, focused on helping organizations and companies build the kind business structure that they really need. Thanks again, guys. And also, we're available on our Roku channel as well. We are a full-on TV channel. So looking at us on there, thanks again. This is Jimbo Paris, and this is the Jimbo Paris Show. Thanks again. Thank you for listening to the Jimbo Paris Show.